That's a good question. they've already nominated Claudia. All right. We are welcome as we gather together now for our Bible study. We are at chapter 36. And in chapter 36, we're going to begin at the second verse. I thought you left. Oh, I was told that you guys were all leaving. Okay.
That's what I said to him.
Yeah, I don't know. All right. So, second verse. Let's read. Oh, you give to Claudia and. And why don't you start verse 2 and let's just go through verse 9. Let's start there and see where it takes us.
And Moses called Bezalel and Oholiab, and every craftsman in whose mind the Lord had put skill, everyone whose heart stirred him up to come to do the work. And they received from Moses all the contribution that the people of Israel had brought for doing the work on the sanctuary. They still kept bringing him freewill offerings every morning, so that all the craftsmen who were doing every sort of task on the sanctuary came, each from the task that he was doing, and said to Moses, "The people bring much more than enough for doing the work that the Lord has commanded us to do." So Moses gave command, and word was proclaimed throughout the camp, "Let no man or woman do anything more for the contribution for the sanctuary." So the people were restrained from bringing, for the material that they had was sufficient to do all the work and more. And all the craftsmen among the workmen made the tabernacle with 10 curtains. They were made of fine twined linen and blue and purple and scarlet yarns, with cherubims skillfully worked. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits, and the breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains were the same size.
Okay. All right. So, what stands out in this verse? If you're going back to what we all talked about last week, what do you think stood out in this section?
The overwhelming response.
Yeah, right. The overwhelming response. The eagerness to give was so much that to tell them to stop. Yeah. Boy, wouldn't that be something here if Berea, if the offerings were such that I had to go up and make an announcement at church, please stop giving. Please stop volunteering. Please stop. That's how great the outpouring was. And at that time, and so part of what we want to understand here is, certainly we want to use this as we look at our own stewardship. Are we that generous? And that's a rhetorical question. I'm not looking for you to answer, because oftentimes when we answer, we're actually not thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about the guy sitting next to us or something like that. We don't want to talk about, that's not what we're looking at. It's more rhetorical, though, in the church. Are we that generous that we cannot just stop giving? That is, so of course we recognize our sinfulness in the midst of looking at this this text. But we also want to remember something. The Lord had spoke to Moses. Moses comes down off the mountain. Moses is glowing with the radiance of God. Moses comes down with the very words of God, and the very words of God were to build this tent of meeting and all the ornamentation that goes around it. So they got really excited about it. What we're going to see is that excitement, that stewardship of theirs was short-lived. They will quickly move from that stewardship that was so great that they had to stop to worshiping false idols, to stoning the prophets, to denying God the presence of the Messiah when Jesus is born. So you see what I mean? Is there was an enthusiasm for a project, maybe not necessarily a true stewardship. Okay? So we don't want to just compare them to us and say, oh, well, look at how poor we are. We certainly want to take this in context and see that they were overwhelming in their gift, but it was a really short term, and so that is something that we see. And when you think of, and when we think back to your days, whether they be here at Berea or at any of your previous churches, you probably did the same thing. There was something new and special, and man, we just couldn't wait to get on board with that. And when we get on board, and then after a while, it becomes old hat, and because there's not something new, our stewardship wanes also. Theirs is going to do the same thing, and that's something that we see here. Another thing, though, to keep in mind is that this is certainly proof or acknowledgement that there are more than enough resources to do the work of the church at any time and in any place. That it doesn't matter, that it doesn't matter where we are, that if the work of the church is to be done, God will see to it that there is an abundance of resources for that. And that's what we see here. This was all God's work. Even though we look at it from the hands of man, this was God doing his work through his people. And that's what we see here. The rest of the text was them fulfilling what he had commanded Moses to do. And we're going to see that now as we go through the rest of this chapter. So does somebody want to pick it up and read from 10 to 19?
When I was at Mount Olive, this was years ago, they published yearly booklet that listed every communicant member and how much they gave for the year.
Ooh.
And entertaining to see, right away we looked who gave the most, who didn't give anything.
Yeah.
And it was like, they don't do that.
No, and by doing that, what are we doing? We're not looking at ourselves in comparison to, each other.
Right.
We're looking at as far as wanting to lift ourselves up. What we are doing is we might be looking at so and so and saying, well, they didn't do anything, did they? Right. Or boy, that guy must have a lot of money.
Right.
Or, you see what I mean? It caused us to judge each other rather than, I think, being fruitful in what we're doing. Yeah. So, yeah. Start at 10, go through 19.
They joined 5 of the curtains together and did the same with the other 5. Then they made loops of blue material along the edge of the end curtain in one set, and the same was done with the end curtain in the other set. They also made 50 loops on one curtain and 50 loops on the end curtain of the other set, with the loops opposite each other. Then they made 50 gold clasps and used them to fasten the 2 sets of curtains together so that the tabernacle was a unit. They made curtains of goat hair for the tent over the tabernacle, 11 altogether. 11 curtains were the same size, 30 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. They joined 5 of the curtains into one set, and the other 6 into another set. Then they made 50 loops along the edge of the end curtain in one set, and also along the edge of the end curtain in the other set. They made 50 bronze clasps to fasten the tent together as a unit. Then they made for the tent a covering of ram skins dyed red, and over that a covering of hides of sea cows.
I was thinking when we made the Christmas, if we had had such precise directions, I wonder how many we would have made. Okay. They made upright frames of acacia wood for the tabernacle. Each frame was 10 cubits long and a cubit and a half wide, with 2 projections set parallel to each other. They made all the frames of the tabernacle in this way. They made 20 frames for the south side of the tabernacle and made 40 silver bases to go under them, 2 bases for each frame, 1 under each projection. For the other side, the north side of the 2 under each frame, they made 6 frames for the far end, that is the west end of the tabernacle, and 2 frames were made for the corners of the tabernacle at the far end. At these 2 corners, the frames were double from the bottom all the way to the top and fitted into a single ring. Both were made alike. So there were 8 frames and 16 silver bases, 2 under each frame.
Somebody want to read just from 31 then to the end of the chapter?
They also made crossbars of acacia wood, 5 for the frames on one side of the tabernacle, 5 for those on the other side, and 5 for the frames on the west, at the far end of the tabernacle. They made center crossbar so that it extended from end to end at the middle of the frames. They overlaid the frames with gold and made gold rings to hold the crossbars. They also overlaid the crossbars with gold. They made the curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and finely twisted linen, with the cherubim worked into it by a skilled craftsman. They made 4 posts of acacia wood for it and overlaid them with gold. They made gold hooks for them and cast their 4 silver bases. For the entrance to the tent, they made a curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and finely twisted linen, the work of an embroiderer, and they made 5 posts with hooks for them. They overlaid the tops of the posts and their bands with gold and made their 5 bases of bronze.
Okay. Yeah, and that picture will look very similar to the sheet that I gave out to you about a month or 2 ago that shows the layout of the tabernacle, of the tent of meeting. And so, yeah, what we're seeing here is this would be phase 1 of the construction. And so this would be the actual building itself, or the tent itself. And that would be chapter 36. Now, when we get into 37 and 38, we're going to get into all of the items that are inside the church. And again, as we read this, we're going to see really this is all just the fulfillment of how God laid it out to Moses earlier. So, does somebody want to pick up 37 and read 37, the first 9 verses of 37? Steve, you're going to be walking around a lot today, because
Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half was its length, a cubit and a half its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. And he overlaid it with pure gold inside and outside, and made a molding of gold around it. And he cast for it 4 rings of gold for its 4 feet, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other side. And he made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold, and put the poles into the rings on the side of the ark to carry the ark. And he made a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half was its length, a cubit and a half its breadth. And he made 2 cherubim of gold. He made them hammered work on the 2 ends of the mercy seat, 1 cherub on one end and 1 cherub on the other end. Of one piece with the mercy seat, he made the cherubim on its 2 ends. The cherubim spread out their wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces one to another. Toward the mercy seat were the faces of the cherubim.
Okay. So here we have the making of the Ark of the Covenant, and the mercy seat and the cherub. What's the significance of the mercy seat and the cherubim? Do you remember? Isn't that where God was? This is where God would be present. This would, of course, this is going to be behind that curtain. But this is where God says that when that tent is going to be overshadowed or clouded over, and God is present, the people, God is going to be on the mercy seat. Okay? Now, God is spirit. All right? That's what we learn about our Heavenly Father, is He's spirit. So, when we talk about Him being on the mercy seat, does that mean that that's the only place that God was present in that temple? No. So why would He say it that way, though? It's interesting. It's a focal point. I don't disagree with that. It's a focal point, but if it was truly a focal point, why would He hide it behind a curtain? Okay, but I think you're right. Okay, I really believe you are right. Why the focal point? Okay, and how does it reinforce that He's there? I think you're absolutely right.
Well, it was something tangible.
Again, there's it. That's what I wanted you, where I wanted you to go with it. Yes. Think of us. Okay, we got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of us in the room now. And I say to you that God is present. Well, of course, we in the way we can say, well, of course He's present, right? But our brain needs something tangible to look at. And so, for us, when we talk about God's presence, immediately your eyes could go to the cross on the altar, or the bread and the wine on the altar. You see? Or for some it might even focus on the picture that is back over here. See, our brain needs that. When we were like remodeling our kitchen, or even when we were making a quilt or something, Robin has a wonderful ability to put colors together, fabrics in a quilt or whatever the case may be. However, she can't do it well up here, okay, without seeing it in front of her face. And so for her, when it comes to making the quilt, she's got, a dozen fabrics, and they're all laid out, and some are overlapping others so that in the way that they would be, or whatever the case may be, because her eyes need to see what it looks like to reaffirm what she already knows. In the same way, God does that for the people, for exactly what Emily was saying, is that he tells them, he says, I'm here. But if there's nothing to point to, our sinful brains will say, are you really? Are you really? So what he does is he says, I will be on the mercy seat. But, of course, if I'm present with you, you cannot see me face to face, or you will be consumed. And so here he is behind that curtain. Now, think about how intriguing that is. God is with us. He's back. He's there. It's almost like he's back there. We can't go back there, but we want to go back there. It's that type of a thing. You remember the movie The Wizard of Oz, right? When we talked about Oz, what did people want to do? They wanted to go and see what was behind the curtain, and there's a pride in a silly way. You have Let's Make a Deal, the TV game show. And there's 3 curtains. And there's a prize behind each curtain, but you don't know what they are, but they're there. It would make the show a lot more interesting than if the host of the show would say, I have 3 prizes for you to choose from, what you want to choose from, A, B, or C. It wouldn't be anywhere near as intriguing as the curtains. Well, in the same way, God is giving us something tangible to help our little pea brains understand the unknown, the non-tangible. So that is the significance of Word and Sacrament, is that God is present with us. But he's being present in Word and Sacrament, we recognize his presence through these means. In the same way, they recognize his presence through the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. Okay? So, yeah, that's exactly right. All right, somebody want to go to the making of the showbread table, which would be 10 through 16. No, I don't know if we do or not. But the significance of the acacia wood, again, we talked about this a couple of months ago. Anybody remember? What was the significance of the acacia wood? It was available. It was common. It would be like, for us, it would be like an elm tree. They're everywhere. Okay?
That part of the world.
Yeah, they're everywhere. So there was nothing unusual or exotic about acacia wood. So that's all we really need to care when it comes to understanding that.
I just was wondering what it felt like or what it looked like.
Yeah.
If it was soft or hard or...
Yeah, it was a hardwood. It looked like wood. Yeah, yeah.
It's those big fluffy trees that you see in the African desert.
Oh, okay. That's like haycock? Like the fluffy...
No, like the big trees, if you see the desert scene where you see a big tree,
Yeah.
that's an acacia tree.
Okay.
They grow in hot places.
They like hot weather.
Yeah, so
Dry.
they won't grow in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's not arid enough here. But again, the key to it is it's common. Okay. But also, now think about it. What would be the significance of it being a tree that grows in a very arid area like that?
Pretty darn hardy.
Yeah, and it's not prone to rot. Okay? Where the trees that grow in areas where there's a lot of moisture, they are affected heavily by moisture. Acacia wood wouldn't be. Okay? All right. Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
They made the table of acacia wood 2 cubits long and a cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. Then they overlaid it with pure gold and made a gold molding around it. They also made around it a rim of handbreadth wide and put a gold molding on the rim. They cast 4 gold rings for the table and fastened them to the 4 corners where the 4 legs were. The rings were put close to the rim to hold the poles used in carrying the table. The poles for carrying the table were made of acacia wood and were overlaid with gold. And they made them pure gold, the articles for the table, its plates and dishes and bowls, and its pitchers for the pouring out of drink offering.
Okay. All right, so the showbread table, that would be there, which is where the bread would be placed each and every day, and that bread, of course, would be used. Would have been used by the priest and his family for their own consumption. And you'll see that the bowls and the flagons and all of those essentials that were there, they were all made of gold. You probably noticed, not every church does this, but many churches, the bowls, the ciborium, the flagons, all of these, everything that holds the communion elements, oftentimes will be a gold or a gold plated. That's not unusual. In Berea, where ours are that way. Now, I think Berea used to be of silver, of which we have, and here in our late service, we will use pottery. We also have used blown glass for it, but there it would have been. It was the gold, and so you'll see a lot of that being reproduced today in churches, and it was, again, think about where the table was that contained the bread. Do you remember when we looked at the tent of meeting at the tabernacle, where the showbread table was located? Do you recall? Without cheating at your notes now. Yeah. Does anybody remember?
It was on this side of the curtain off to the right.
It was on this side of the curtain, but it was the closest thing to the curtain. Yes. Yes, so isn't it interesting how the bread, where God feasts with his people, was the closest thing to where where God's presence was. All right? So, I mean, you think about it, it doesn't mean that if your church had a table in the back corner and all of the communion elements were there, and you brought all those communion elements over here to do the service. I mean, there would be nothing that would say, well, that would make it no longer communion. However, what's the significance of the communion elements right there on the altar? The closest to the place of God's presence. Absolutely. And so, yeah.
A lot of people, like churches, have their baptismal font right in the front of the altar.
Yeah, there will be some that will have it in the front of the altar, and there are many churches that have it at the back of the church, the baptismal font. So there's a number of different places where there are baptismal fonts, and some it's at the back of at the entrance of the church, because that's how we enter into the family of God, is through baptism. So they'll have it there. Some will have it, in the center. When I was at my first parish, it was in the center, as close to the steps as it could be. We ended up moving it to the center of the church for a different reason, but it was still centered. Berea, it is off to the side, as in, there's many churches that where the actual architecture was designed as a cross. So you would have, my former church, Garden Homes Lutheran Church, is that way. It would be the long nave, right? So you'd have the altar and the nave of your pews, and then there'd be these two wings off to the side. The one wing would carry the choirs and the organ, so you'd have the music on the one side, and the wing on the other side had the baptismal font. And so it would be all done inside of a cross. That's very common. Mount Calvary is kind of laid out, similar to that. But definitely Garden Homes was. But notice when it comes to Berea, what do you see about the baptismal font at Berea that helps us to understand that it is close to the presence of God?
The triune God, you have the Holy Spirit, the dove, and you have
You would have that, yeah, that sculpture, certainly, that sculpture helps us to understand that. That's a good point. That wasn't the one I was thinking of, though.
crucifix in the middle,
Okay,
and you speak God's words from the pulpit.
right.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, it's directly across from the pulpit,
Right, yeah.
across from the word.
Right. Well, so what you see at Berea is you have the word at the pulpit. You have the and the means of grace, Holy Communion at the altar, and baptism. So the whole means of grace is there and visible. But what's the other thing that's there that you may not even realize? They're all elevated. They're all elevated. You have to step up to the baptismal font. You have to step up to the pulpit. You have to step up to the altar. They are all set up. They are all elevated. Okay? So that was part of how Berea Lutheran Church, in its architecture, helps us to visualize, as we were talking about earlier, that those are set apart for something special. Okay? Yes, and then there's the other artwork. Obviously, you have the corpus, and then you have the dove, and then you have the sword on the pulpit. The two-edged sword. So you have all of those other images, but the big one really is they're elevated, and they're all visible. So yeah, that would be the significance of the table. So, also you see this as we are reading through here, the structure was important to build that first. Okay? That makes total sense. But then look at how the items are then prepared. It was making the Ark of the Covenant first, making the showbread table next. Now you would think, well, maybe this little showbread table that could come in toward the end. It's just going to make a table, and all that stuff for it. But the significance of it is it was part of that means of God's grace, and so we have it there next. And so now the third thing that's going to be coming up is going to be that significance of the lampstand. And of course, we talked about that before, about the lampstand. So, somebody want to read verse 17 through 24?
They made the lampstand of pure gold and hammered it out, base and shaft. Its flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms were of one piece with it. 6 branches extended from the sides of the lampstand, and 3 on one side, 3 on the other. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms were on one branch, 3 on the next branch, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. And on the lampstand were 4 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. 1 bud was under the first pair of branches extending from the lampstand, a 2nd bud under the 2nd pair, and a 3rd bud under the 3rd pair, 6 branches in all. The buds and the branches were all of one piece, with the lampstand hammered out of pure gold.
Okay. All right.
So detailed.
It is. It is greatly detailed. The flowers and the buds, the branches. Remember what the purpose of the lampstand is for? Twofold purpose. Anybody remember? Twofold purpose of the lampstand.
To shed light probably is one, right?
To shed light on what?
Wherever it wasn't the lampstand for lights?
Yeah. It's what lit up. It's what lit up the tabernacle.
Right.
Absolutely. It provides light in the tabernacle, so it certainly had a practical purpose. Okay. What was the other purpose of the lampstand?
The number 6 was important.
No.
No?
Yeah. There is someone. It's actually a number 7. There's 3 and 3 and 1, so it's 7. So there's 7 lamps on it, and that's the significant number, the completeness of it. But no, what was the other reason for the lampstand? It is the symbol. It's a symbol for God's mercy, for God's mercy and His care. The light, the lamp, the light. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. It is that light is for our darkened heart. Our hearts are said they're dark because of sin. They're blackened because of sin. And this, and Jesus, and then we remember what is Jesus called? Jesus is the light of the world, right? That's the significance of the lampstand. It again points us to Christ. Okay, so when you take a look at it, there's the 3 on either side, right? And you could look at that as well. These 3, that would be a triune, and these 3 be triune. That you could do that. You could also look at it as some of the fruits of the Spirit. You could do that, but the main thing is they are surrounding the one in the center. Okay, so now think about when you look at Berea. Now at Berea, we have a Christ candle that's kind of off on its own. That's the light of Christ, and the only time that light is, that we extinguish that light would be on Good Friday, but then we light it back up again right away to see that he is not dead, he is alive. But then, where else do we have candles?
On the altar.
Okay, behind the altar, right. And how many do we have?
6.
Yeah, or 3 and 3.
3
3
and
and 3. And what's in the center of them?
the Christ candle.
Yeah. How? Yeah. You could either say Christ, the corpus, or even more than that, like right in line with them, is we have the cross on the stand. So you would have really our version of the golden lampstand is the cross and the 3 and 3. So in that way, we have reproduced that golden lampstand. Okay? And so that, and again, the lampstand points to Christ. And so it is the one who it's what lights the whole room. It is, remember, we go back to Revelation. There will be no need for sun or moon. Why? Because the Lamb will be in the center and it will light the whole, all of heaven will be lit by Christ. I mean, that blows you away, We won't need lights. You won't need them. Now, will there be forms of lighting there for any reason, for moods or for, decoration? I don't know. But we know we won't need light because Christ is the light that will be light in the light of heaven. So that is...
Did these lampstands stay lit all the time?
Yes, that lampstand stayed lit all the time. So the high priest would have someone, he would usually have like an apprentice, or it would be like the version almost of an altar boy type of thing, right? And so that would be, and his job would be to keep the lamps lit. Because it's a responsibility of the high priest to keep the lamps lit, but he would utilize someone to do that. So if I was the high priest and Steve was my assistant, Steve would have to stay awake 24 hours a day so he could keep the lamps lit. And if the lamp would fail, here's the interesting thing though. If the lamp would fail, whose fault would it have been? The high priest. So Steve, you got off the hook again. Yeah, yes, but that would be kind of part of his role, as he would, is that he would be caring. He'd be caring for things under the watchful eye of the high priest. But one of them would be to make sure that there was oil in the lamps. So they would have to, part of those flowers, right, they were oil basins. So you had to fill them. What's the other significance of that? When they talked about them, these, they didn't just talk about being lamps, they were branches. Okay? What's the significance of that? I am the vine, you are the branches. So what does that lamp do? That lamp connects Christ to us in the same, in that same way. And so that lamp isn't just one lamp, it's all seven, and it's all seven because it is Christ and his church. So that lamp really is a representation of the church.
Was it fragrant also? Did the oil have a fragrance?
I don't know. Yeah, it was an olive oil. Now there was other more fragrant anointing oil, and that's next. Okay, so if somebody want to read 25 to the end of the chapter.
They made the altar of incense out of acacia wood. It was square, a cubit long and a cubit wide, and 2 cubits high, its horns of one piece with it. They overlaid the top and all the sides and the horns with pure gold, and made a gold molding around it. They made 2 gold rings below the molding, 2 on opposite sides, to hold the poles used to carry it. They made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. They also made the sacred anointing oil and the pure fragrant incense, the work of a perfumer. The fragrant one, yeah.
If there would have been a different fragrance of oil, those two would be competing fragrances. And so we wouldn't have that. That would be something that would not be would not have happened. So while it was a pure incense oil, it was probably did not carry the fragrance in it because the fragrance would have been in the altar of incense. Okay?
I was thinking because they were almond, shaped flowers, that maybe it was an almond,
Right. Yeah.
not necessarily.
Okay. So we got through 2 chapters today. All right. We will pick this up next week. I'm going to shut the camera off